For years, the main way people have reacted to Donald Trump is with just outrage. But what if that's completely the wrong tool for the job? A new book has a totally different take, arguing that if you really want to understand what's coming next, you have to stop judging and start predicting. So let's break down its psychological framework.
So the whole idea behind this book starts with a really simple but kind of powerful observation. The standard playbook against him just hasn't worked. For years, you had journalists, historians, political opponents, all relying on facts, on norms, on expertise, thinking that would be enough. But the evidence, well, it tells a pretty different story.
Just look at the fact-checking. The Washington Post kept a detailed log, over 30,000 false or misleading claims during his presidency. Think about that. This was a huge effort to hold power accountable to the basic truth, and every single one was cataloged. And then, of course, you've got the legal side of things. Multiple impeachments, all those indictments, and, yes, a conviction on 34 felony counts right in Manhattan. If you look at history, any one of these things should have been a game ender, politically speaking.
But what happened? The exact opposite, a lot of the time. After that conviction, his fundraising just exploded, and his poll numbers actually ticked up. And that is the key point the author is making here. If pure outrage was the answer, we would have seen it work by now. It hasn't. So we need a different way of looking at this.
And that's where the book's big idea comes in. And let's be super clear here. The author says understanding is not the same as excusing. Not at all. The goal isn't moral judgment. Plenty of people have done that. The goal is prediction. The idea is that if we can understand the deep-seated psychological patterns, we can actually start to anticipate what's coming next with some real accuracy.
Okay, so what is this new approach, really? Well, the book's argument is that what looks like total chaos on the surface is actually like a machine, a really predictable one that runs on a consistent underlying code. So let's take a look at how that code got written in the first place.
And where does that code come from? The author says you have to go all the way back to his early childhood, where it was all shaped by these two incredibly powerful and really different relationships, one with his father and the other with his mother.
On one side, you have his father, Fred Sr., who basically taught him that the world is this brutal place where you had to be a killer to survive. Dominance was everything. But then, on the complete other side of the spectrum, you have his mother, Mary Ann, who after a serious medical issue became what the book calls a phantom in the house. A totally different kind of emotional landscape.
Now, the book really zeroes in on one specific moment, a kind of foundational wound. When he was just 2.5 years old, his mother got incredibly sick, almost died, and was just gone for a long time. Now, this happened during what psychologists call a critical attachment window. That's a really important time for a kid to learn how to form secure, trusting relationships. And a disruption like that, the book argues it can affect you for your entire life.
Okay, so you've got these two huge forces pushing on him as a kid. A father demanding he be a killer, and a mother who, from his perspective, abandoned him. The argument is, this combination forced him to build this incredibly powerful psychological defense system. Think of it like a suit of armor, designed to protect a really vulnerable self on the inside.
And it's not like this was just a theory for him. He saw with his own eyes what happened if you didn't build that armor. His older brother, Freddy, was a totally different kind of person. More sensitive, wanting to be a pilot, not a real estate guy, and for that he was just relentlessly torn down by both his father and by Donald himself for being too soft. Freddy eventually drank himself to death, and the lesson there was brutal, and it was crystal clear. You either become a killer or you get destroyed.
So with those lessons learned the hard way, as a young man, he finds the perfect mentor to turn it all into a weapon, the infamous Roy Cohn. And Cohn's philosophy, boiled down to these 3 simple, brutal rules, basically became his lifelong playbook for how to deal with literally any challenge that comes his way.
Right, so fast forward to today. How does all this psychological armor actually work? The book describes it almost like an operating system on a computer, with a few core programs that are always running in the background, telling him how to react to pretty much everything. Let's look at that code.
First, let's talk about the hardware it's running on. The central myth has always been the self-made man, but here's the reality. Uncovered by a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigation, he got at least $413 million from his dad's empire, a lot of it through some pretty shady tax schemes. So right from the start, this armor wasn't built from scratch. It was built on a massive foundation of inherited wealth.
So what keeps this machine running? What's its fuel? Well, psychologists have a term for it, narcissistic supply. And this isn't just about having a big ego. It's way deeper than that. It's a constant, desperate need for attention from the outside world, whether it's praise, attention, or even fear, just to feel real. For this kind of psychological machine, the book argues, being ignored is basically the same as dying.
Okay, next up in the operating system is what the author calls the vengeance algorithm. It's like a running list of every single person who's ever slighted him, no matter how small. And the core command is simple: seek revenge and make it 10 times worse. And this is where it gets really interesting. The author points to that 2023 campaign promise, "I am your retribution," as the moment this deeply personal program became an official political platform.
And the last piece of the puzzle is the dominance imperative. This basically means every single interaction, from a simple handshake to a global summit, is seen as a battle, a zero-sum game. In this worldview, there are only winners and losers, people on top and people on the bottom. There's just no such thing as equals.
Okay, so let's put it all together. If this psychology is really that consistent, if this machine is always running the same code time after time, what does this framework actually predict for the future? Let's get into the book's predictions for a potential second term.
Here's the really crucial prediction from the book. A second term would be nothing like the first. See, during the first term, there were often people inside the administration who acted as, guardrails. They would block his most extreme ideas. The prediction is that in a second term, those guardrails would be gone, torn out systematically, and replaced with pre-screened loyalists whose only real qualification is total personal devotion. And that really brings us back to the central idea of this whole explainer. The patterns that have been locked in for almost 80 years, they're not going to change. In fact, the argument is, without those outside constraints, the machine's core programming, that constant need for supply, for vengeance, for dominance, it's not just going to continue, it's going to accelerate.
And that's the final and maybe most provocative thought the book leaves you with. It's really trying to get us to shift our entire perspective away from being shocked by every new event, and instead to start looking at it as a set of predictable outcomes, all based on a psychological pattern that, according to the author, has been hiding in plain sight all along.